Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
You have a whole bunch of ideas, right? How do you actually pick and choose which is the correct one? You know, let's say you come out with 25 ideas and you can't develop all the 25 ideas, right? They're all ideas to a certain level of, finish that you have. Okay. So maybe you need to prioritize, few of them to take forward, right? So what is the method that you can use to actually evaluate these ideas and then come out with maybe 2-3 of them to take it further. Okay, so let's look at an evaluation technique, a very simple one, okay, through which you can prioritize your ideas, followed by what we call as a concept map. Okay, so the final ideas that you have, can you actually visualize it in form of a mapping, so that the main idea, when you look at the map itself with some visuals, you'll actually understand what the concept is. Okay, so that's what we're going to do it in Ideation Part 2. We have a very wonderful quote from Dr. Abdul Kalam. Okay, he says, learning gives creativity, creativity leads to thinking, thinking provides knowledge, and knowledge makes you great. Okay, what a wonderful quote. From learning to creativity to thinking to knowledge, and that's actually is very, very good for our human or mankind, right, or life on earth. Okay, and he encapsulates this in a very nice quote. So let's look at the process, Ideation Part 2. So where does ideation fit? Okay, it fits into the third part of the design thinking and innovation process. Okay, we've done research, both primary and secondary, which we followed with analysis, okay, with which you came to redefine your problem statement after analysis. Now we are at the phase 3. We did ideation part 1, this is part 2, okay, which will be followed with prototyping, testing and implementing. Okay, so in terms of the diagram, in summary, okay, research is you have to look all over the place, and analysis you have to come down into few factors that you want to take ahead. Then this part, ideation, again you have to think many solutions, right? You need various concepts, so the more the better, and then we'll prioritize and take few of them forward in terms of making the prototype, then testing it, getting feedback, reiterating and then finally implementing it. Okay, so we are in the middle of the design process, again very, very important but also very exciting phase. Okay, so let's look at what is Ideation Part 2. Okay, so it actually is an extension of the Part 1. Okay, and if you want to, you're not so happy with the solutions you got, you want some more ideas or concepts that are unique, new and innovative, you can use what's happening in Part 2, okay, the techniques and the tools we've done. So we'll start with a creative method known as synectics, more of it later. In addition to synectics, we'll also look at very similar creative methods. Okay, one is analogical thinking. We'll also make use of metaphor or metaphorical thinking and inspiration from nature for design. Okay, so we'll go through each of them. Okay, so if you look at synectics, okay, so this was, this term was coined by two, professors, George M. Prince and William Gordon, okay, and they coined this method, okay, and actually they adopted this word synectics, okay, from the Greek language, and it actually means the joining together of different or apparently irrelevant elements. Okay, so basically, if you have an idea, you try to connect it with another idea which is not at all connected, normally, but you try to find something, parts of it which can actually make a difference, okay, and you try to find this connection and make a combination, okay. So that's a very interesting thing, okay, because if you can do that, you can actually come out with surprising solutions, okay. So let's look at the technique itself, okay. So if you look at synectics, okay, it's quite useful in ideation by making a connection between ideas that are out of the box and not necessarily connected with each other, okay. So he says that you can also make use of analogies, okay, because analogies are, a combination. It is something like this. Let's try to see if that works, okay. Putting yourself in a new shoes, that's another way of doing it. It can lead to new and surprising ideas. He also encouraged one to use metaphors, okay, or a metaphorical thinking, okay, which can make familiar things and the strange things familiar. It can make familiar things strange and the strange things familiar. Okay. So, he encouraged the use of analogies and metaphors in addition to synectics, right. Okay. So, let us look at all of them. Okay. Let us go into what is analogical thinking. Okay. So, if you look at analogical thinking, it makes use of an analogy to generate fresh new ideas and make surprising connections. Okay. Let us look at what are the different types of analogies. Okay. So, one is personal analogy. Okay. So, let us say I am designing a chair. Okay. So, imagine myself as the chair and somebody is going to come sit on me, and how comfortable can I make it? Okay. What posture can I take to make the person comfortable? So, basically you imagine yourself as the idea for the object and you role play the situation and think of, what kind of experiences have you had if somebody actually sits on you or you are carrying a load, and that can actually lead to new ideas. Okay. Very simple. Okay. Personal analogy is the first type of analogies. We are looking at few of them. Basically, you have to imagine yourself as the idea or the concept or the object, okay, or the service, and see how you can role play the situation and think of, ideas that can come out of it. Okay. The second is direct analogy. That means that you make use of similar objects or situations in both the man-made world and the natural world and see if you can make connections. Okay. So, if you want to look at the chair again, we will take it, okay, and you want to look at how do you actually go in the nature and sit. Okay. If you want to sit, where do you sit? Okay. You will sit on a ledge, you will find a log to sit, okay, or you might find a branch to sit, okay, or you might find a rock on which you can sit. Okay. So, these objects, how are they different from the chair that you have? So, can I make a rock into a chair, or can I make a branch into a chair, or maybe I can fix the chair onto the wall itself, right. So, I can just have a chair, when I want to sit, and there no chair when I do not want to sit, right. So, you still have the space around. Okay. So, I am just brainstorming, but basically direct analogy means that you find similar things in different situations and see if it can fit into the ideation process. Okay. We also talk about fantasy analogy. Okay. That means that you are just using your imagination to make the familiar strange, okay, and the strange familiar. Okay. So, basically you are inverting the situations. Okay. So, again you can actually fantasize what a chair is, okay, how chairs can be, the shape of it. Okay. So, it is almost like thinking the impossible, but then try to make and apply it to the problems that you are trying to solve. Okay. So, analogical thinking is making use of an analogy in generating fresh and new ideas. Okay. And you can actually make very surprising connections. When we go to the tool section, we will have more details and we will show you many more examples than what I talked about. Okay. So, let us go into metaphorical thinking. Metaphorical thinking actually makes use of metaphors to generate fresh new ideas and again make surprising connections. What is a metaphor? Okay. So, I have got a dictionary definition of it. it's a figure of speech in which a word or a phrase denoting one kind of an object or action used in place of another to suggest a likeness or an analogy between them. Okay. So, if you look at metaphors, they are an extension of the analogy, okay, and you make use of it. Okay. My teacher has a heart of gold. Okay. And when you say that, it says a lot about the teacher. That means that she is giving, she is very supportive. You connote lots of values because of this metaphor, heart of gold. Okay. Or for example, let us look at a design metaphor, the desktop as a metaphor. When computing came into the desktop, okay, and people needed to make it simple to understand what is where. Okay. So, they used the metaphor of the desktop. Okay. So, it was a graphical version of it. So, the desktop had folders, it had a dustbin. The environment in which you work was simulated on top of a desktop. So, it made the familiar environment of the desktop onto the virtual environment of the computer screen. Okay. So, the working environment got actually mapped to the computer screen, and it made your life much more easy, right, because you are using a metaphor to do it. Okay. So, the desktop is another example of a metaphor. So, if you are generating ideas, think of metaphors. Okay. Metaphors in the beginning may not be connected to the problem that you are doing, but if you can actually make this connection, then it can actually suggest a very nice and an unusual solution. Okay. So, this is metaphorical thinking. Of course, the third one is getting inspired by nature to do design. Okay. Mankind has done this from time immemorial. Okay. You can go back to in history and think of instances where actually man looked at nature through observation and converted some of those findings into things that are useful to the man. Okay. So, this is has happened over generations. Okay. That nature has served as an example, as a provider of solutions, and you actually adopt this to your own situations. Okay. So, let us look at some examples. For example, the shape of the beak of a kingfisher bird, because kingfisher bird can go into the water and pick up something. Okay. So, it is very streamlined. Okay. And the bullet train in the beginning was making a lot of noise, because it goes at such fast speeds and because of the air coming in here. So, there was a booming sound which was happening. But then they tried to put the kingfisher, that beak, onto the bullet train front, and suddenly the noise was gone. Okay. So, this is one instance of you actually looking at nature and seeing an instance which is kind of useful, and see if I can actually adopt it to my situation, and maybe that is the solution there. Okay. Or for example, fractals. Okay. Fractals are found in nature, you can find it, and they actually make very strong structures. Okay. And so, the instance is that if I am doing an architectural building, so can I actually use the fractal theory or the structure to build my building, so that the structure becomes very, very strong. Okay. You will see that in many instances. For example, temples in India do follow the fractal model. Okay. And then you can see that they last for thousands of years. Right. And one of the reasons is that because it actually has the structure of fractals, which is actually a very strong structure. Okay. So, this is just few instances of doing it. Okay. So, we started with synectics. Okay. Synectics is thinking out of the box, and it says that try to use analogies. We looked at different kind of analogies, and one kind of analogy is metaphor, and metaphor is a word that we commonly see it in literature, in poetry, in films. Okay. So, for design also you can use metaphors, like the case of desktop which has been used. And the last one is looking at the nature and getting inspired from examples from the nature. Okay. And if you can actually adopt some things from the nature, okay, and to your own problem solving, that is the fourth method here. So, we have thought of 4 methods. Okay. We will have details in the tools section and show you more examples. okay, and in your project you will need to try to use these techniques, okay, because they are all extremely simple techniques, very easy to use, and you can actually come out with really nice solutions. Okay. From this we will go to the next one. You now have a kitty of concepts, right, many concepts together. Now you want to prioritize it, and how do you evaluate it? Okay. So, we will again look at an extremely simple steps, way of doing it. Okay. So, it can be evaluated and prioritized, and the top ones you can take it forward. Okay. The way to do it would be to form a matrix. Okay. You have ideas on one axis. Okay. So, maybe idea 1, idea 2, idea 3, like that you have on one axis, and you have the characteristics that you want in the product in the next axis. Okay. So, for example, I have given some 4 kinds of properties that you can look at. For example, how wonderful the user experience is while using this particular product. Okay. So, you can give it some weightage. Okay. Does it actually have sustainability built into the product, because it is a big concern now. You can give some weightage for this. How nice it looks, the form, finally it has to fit into the environment, be in some place. Okay. Does it actually gel over there? So, the form of it, the elements of design, you can look at it and give some weightage to this. How well does it function? That means that if it is supposed to grind something, does it actually grind it? Okay. If it has to light something, how nicely it lights and how you can control it. Okay. So, function is a very important form. Okay. So, give it some weightage. Of course, you are trying to do something new, right. So, is it creative as an idea? Is it innovative as an idea? Especially this point becomes very, very important if you are going to the market, because there are already existing solutions, and if yours have to actually compete with the existing solutions, it has to need something which the others are not giving, right. So, there is that innovative factor which is very, very important for a product. Okay. And of course, there are rules of how much does it cost, okay, and how easy to maintain it. Okay. So, these are also additional factors. Okay. So, I have given you 4, you can add more properties into this, but they form one axis and you have the solutions in the other axis. You give some criteria and you give some weightage, okay, and you can probably even choose a scale for doing it, maybe 1 to 1 is terrible, 9 is great, 5 is average. Okay. So, you can give some weightage and scale and give these marks to each one of those factors, and then you will see that some of the products have more weightage than the others, and then you can decide and debate and then select one of them. Okay. So, very simple way of evaluating concepts, okay, using a method, right. And then we will go into, let us say after the evaluation you want to go ahead with, let us say 2 or 3 concepts. Okay. You can actually visualize these concepts, and when we visualize, it is called as a concept map. Okay. Here you can see that it was Joseph Nowak at Cornell University who actually coined this term, and he used concept mapping for understanding subjects, and he uses as a method of learning, okay, so that people remember things in the subject, how parts and components of the subjects are related to each other. Okay. So, if you look at it, concept maps visually depict how the idea is interconnected to other components or parts of the problem space that you are trying to find a solution. Okay. So, at one glance you can actually explain what your idea is, okay, and you need to be visual. You can actually draw it, but also you can see how the connects are, the parts are connected to it. Concept maps are very helpful to give an overview of the parts of the solution, how they combine together and depict it. Okay. So, let us look at an example from that. Okay. So, this is I have said DSOS is one of the references that I always give, because DSOS, as the name suggests, is a web space which documents different things of design. Okay. So, if you look at it, okay, it is open access. Okay, and it has many things in it. It has courses, it has resources, it has case studies, it has a gallery, it has videos, and it has tools, right. So, that is the core of the resource, and you can, how the content is created, experts create it, we also do it through open, source, okay. So, it is a digital online content, and of course, you can access it through any means, okay, either through your mobiles or computers or desktops, okay, and it can actually form a network at the end of it, okay, and students, or learners, right, faculty members can make use of it. If I show this diagram, right, and this was the final idea of what we put in place, okay, for DSOS, and at one glance you can actually see what DSOS does. Okay. So, it becomes very, very useful to depict and represent what the DSOS and its interconnectedness. Okay. So, this is what we call as a concept map. We will show more examples later on. Why is this part important? The main reason is that it's again adds to your creativity, and you're actually giving much more ideas, right. So, your pool of ideas or concepts increase, and synectics is a very effective method. Synectics along with metaphors, analogies and inspirations from nature can actually make a world of difference. Okay. Once there are several ideas, the ones that are most appropriate can be chosen through evaluation. So, that is what we called as concept evaluation. And then of course, if you want to actually visualize this and represent it with all the interconnections and the components put together, then you can actually make a concept map. Okay. So, we are still at the ideation phase and actually representing the ideas. Okay. So, if you look at what this section involves, okay, I have actually made a very simple, right, idea of this. You start with synectics, that is to do with analogies, then you go into metaphors and nature inspiration. Okay. Then you do concept evaluation of all the ideas that you have, and then make maps of few of the ones that you are taking forward. Okay. So, that is the summation of this section, and I have given the same references as the previous section, because it still has to do with creativity and ideation, and you will find lots of resources in DSOS, and Act of Creation by Arthur Koestler, Lateral Thinking by Edward de Bono, okay, and Creativity, the Psychology of Discovery and Invention, okay, is an extremely nice book. Okay. So, if you get the time, please actually get these books and have a look at them. Okay. Ending with a quote by Abraham Lincoln, the best way to predict the future is to create it. Okay. So, that is the crux of it. Okay. If you are in this world of design and creativity and innovation, you are actually inventing the future, right, and you will be creating and be part of that innovative section. Okay. So, thanks a lot for listening.